Hi, I'm Tony V. I would like to tell you about an act of God. It had been a challenging day at the government school on the west side of Jacksonville, Florida, where I teach 4th grade. So, my wife, Lois, convinced me to take a walk with her and relax. Well, that didn't happen. It is often stated that the two major causes of marital discord are children and money, more particularly, the lack of money. When your neighbors are working and can't meet their monthly bills, it's a recession, and when you can't meet your bills, it's a downright depression. And I was depressed. I just don't understand it, I grumbled. We never have enough money for any of the things that I want. Yet, we always find enough money to help everyone, and everything else, referring to our own children and the dogs we foster. I have always hoped that this would be the time in my life that I could enjoy the fruits of my labors. I continued. If we were befallen by an act of God, we would be in a world of hurt. I don't know what kind of act of God you're talking about, she responded firmly. But, I'll tell you how I would act if I were God. I'd strike you down where you stand for being so selfish concerning your children, and all of God's other needy creatures. Later, as I lay in bed struggling to sleep, the words, act of God, continued to haunt me. I decided to take 4 caplets of Tylenol PM with Benadryl, instead of usual 2 I take nightly, to ensure that I would relax enough to fall to sleep. I kept hearing those words over and over in my head, act of God, act of God, act of God. What in Sam Hill is an act of God? I blurted loudly. I'm not sure if I was sleeping, or having a waking dream. However, I found myself transported to another place in time. It was ancient Jerusalem. I know it was Jerusalem, because at the main gate where I was standing, there was a sign that read, "Welcome to Jerusalem, population 666. It was not a clean town, actually, it was filthy. There were animals, and animal excrement all over the streets. The smells were nauseating. The vicinity was strewn with browning palm leaves that I assumed were to cover the waste and nastiness. All of the people were dressed in robes, most of which were in tatters. Although the people were speaking in a language that seemed very strange to me, I could understand what was being said. Suddenly, my attention was captured by the commotion of a large group of people in advance of me. I hurried ahead to see what the buzz was. A large crowd of people were gathered around a detail of soldiers leading a man toward the hill. The man was carrying a cross on his shoulders. The soldiers whipped his already bleeding back as he struggled with his burden. It hurt so much, and with the weight of the cross on his shoulders, the man kept falling down. Many in the crowd were laughing and taunting the man who was wearing an old royal garment and a crown of twisted thorns on his head. As I looked onto the scene, I had the strangest feeling that I knew this man, however I could not remember from where. Suddenly, I heard a loud whistle, and the soldier who seemed to be in charge, the one with whip, shouted, "Take 5 men." The men stopped, started talking loudly, passed around a goatskin gourd filled with red wine, lit and shared cigarettes. I felt drawn to the man with the cross, who had dropped to one knee, and went over to comfort him. "Is there anything I can do for you?" I asked. "Yes, do you have a smoke?" he answered. "Sure," I said as I reached into my pocket and pulled a pack of Marlboro Reds, and offered him one. "Thanks," he said meekly as he took one from the pack with trembling fingers. "Do you have a light?" he asked, placing a cowboy killer to his mouth. "Now, I guess you want me to kick you in the butt to get your lungs started," I said, grinning to add some levity to this dreadful situation. He laughed and told me that he smoked Marlboros also. "Do you save the Marlboro miles?" I questioned. Smiling, he answered, "Sure. How do you think I got this cross?" he said, pointing to his shoulder. We both laughed, and I knew that I would follow this man anywhere. The sergeant of detail blew his whistle again, and so, I followed him up the hill. When we reached the top of the hill, they nailed my new friend to the cross he had carried. There were 3 crosses erected on that hill. He was nailed to the one in the middle. There was a man hung with rope, not nailed, on his right, and another man hung to his left. The soldiers watched, smoked, drank, and made fun of my friend. They were also throwing dice to decide how to divide up the clothes he had been wearing. There were many spectators, some of whom walked by and shouted, "You saved others, why can't you save yourself?" and spat on him. I had never witnessed such cruelty and inhumanity. "I will save you," I shouted as I began to climb up the cross. I made it to his right hand, dodging the spears that were being thrust at me, and I pulled the large nail from his wrist. Then after crawling across the beam to his left hand, I pulled out another nail. "You forgot my feet," he shouted, his voice trailing off as he fell forward, head under heels. Many wise men have suggested that no good deed ever goes unpunished, and for my act of kindness, my right hand became immediately deformed and useless. It burned, and the bony arthritic-stricken fingers twisted and stretched out of control. My whole body stiffened with a fear of what was happening. I suddenly remembered that I was in a dream. "This is a dream. This is a dream. Wake up," I told myself. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw the familiar surroundings of my room. Then as I reached for my watch to check the time, I freaked. My hand was still crippled. "Oh God, my dear God," I shrieked. "What have you done? I'm so sorry. I was only trying to help. Forgive me. Please make my hand like the other one." Suddenly my left hand became as hideous-looking and useless as my right hand. In a panic, I woke my wife. Lois rushed me to the emergency room at Memorial Hospital. Crying and screaming uncontrollably, I explained to the doctor what had happened. "I'm sorry, Tony V, there is nothing I can do for you," he said calmly. "It was an act of God,